Clean architecture is an architectural style that separates software modules into different layers based on a set of principles. It was introduced by Robert C. Martin in 2008. This architecture is closely related to the hexagonal architecture, the onion architecture, and the domain-driven design approach. All these styles had a common goal: keep the application domain and business logic at the center of the architecture. The clean architecture has 4 layers. Entities, known as enterprise business rules, they represent plain entities with no layer dependencies. Use cases, it defines the application-specific business rules. They interact with the entities layer and implement the required system use cases. Interface adapters, these are the bridge between the use cases and external dependencies such as databases, APIs, or user interfaces. Their role is to transform the data from the use cases layer to external systems and vice versa. This layer contains controllers, APIs, and interfaces. Frameworks and drivers. It's the layer responsible for communicating with external environments like web frameworks, UIs, devices, and databases. It handles all the low-level detail implementations from external sources. The main objective of the clean architecture style is to ensure that dependencies go from outer layers to inner ones. External dependencies rely on adapters to establish indirect communication with the business logic. Although the use cases layer doesn't know anything about frameworks and drivers, use cases employ domain entities to route data using adapters. Before entering in code, I'll mention 2 important notes. Robert Martin, author of the clean architecture, says, "The architecture should screen the intent of the system." Don't force the system to adapt to a specific architectural style all the time, because it depends on your application and its requirements. Additionally, it's better to start with a simple and flexible structure. Don't try to add regarding code thinking in future implementations. Apply the Yapney principle. Features should only be added when required. Let's create a basic ASP.NET Core Web API skin using the clean architecture style. Select the respective project. I will use .NET 7. First of all, I will create 2 inner layers, the use cases and the entities layers. To do that, let me add a new solution folder called core, and here create 2 class libraries. The first one is to represent the use cases with the application name, and the second project with the domain name to represent the entities layer. The next step is to create a new folder called infrastructure that will represent the frameworks and drivers layer on the clean architecture. On the infrastructure folder, I will add a new project called clean architecture.persistence. So here we go. We have the use cases and entities layers, the frameworks and drivers layer represented with the persistence project, and the interface and adapters layer, that is the API project. So let me add a quick example of how to use this clean architecture style. In the persistence, I will add a new database service that will implement a database service. The contracts or interfaces are located in the application layer. So here I will add a new folder called interfaces. I will create a new interface called iDatabase service with a simple method to get users, a list of users. And this user is an entity that I will add in the domain project. Let me add a new folder called entities, delete this one, add the user class with 2 simple properties, ID and a name. So the application has a reference to the domain layer, and the persistence project needs a reference to the application layer to use the interfaces. So I will implement the interface method and just return a fake user, new with ID and name. Is just for test purposes, and the API, in this case interfaces and adapters layer, will allow the communication between the infrastructure project and the application layer. So to do that, in the program.cs file, I will register the service, a database service, add a reference to the application project and the implementation, that is the persistence project. Here we go. And now here in the controller, let me get rid of this logic. Use the get. I will rename it as user controller. That returns a list of users. I will inject the iDatabase dependency and return database service that get users. That's it. Cool. Let's run the web API and see what happens. We have a Swagger UI test the user endpoint, and as you can see, we have the fake response. What are the benefits of clean architecture? It's based on design principles, separation of consents, and the creation of flexible, maintainable, and testable systems. It follows solid principles, domain-driven design, design patterns, and microservices architecture. UI, database, framework, and external agencies are independent from the core business logic, so it allows switching or modifying outside walls without affecting the core inner layers, which remain the same. Highly testable business logic and domain by isolating both inner layers from outer ones. It's also important to mention the drawbacks of this architecture. Difficult to implement in smaller, fixed resource projects where simpler or pragmatic architectures are more appropriate. An initial step learning curve, as the architecture itself involves several design principles to control and apply in the correct way. Using additional layers adds complexity, and clean architecture is more beneficial for large systems where maintainability and flexibility are a must. If you want to learn more about clean coding techniques, don't forget to subscribe. May the code be with you.